Hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages, my name is Abby, and welcome to episode 8 of Gregtech New Horizons. Last time, we automated cetane boosted diesel, and today, well, that's what we're going to talk about. Right now, we're starting off by making 32 more advanced circuits. Because I ran out of advanced circuits while filming for the last part of episode 7, and I had to use a couple of the components I already made, because I was already planning on making 32 more advanced circuits at the end of last episode, but I just needed more of the circuits to finish off some of the machines for the cetane boosted diesel area, because obviously I wanted that finished first. I ended up needing to make a lot more components than I needed just to be able to finish the whole 32. While I'm rounding out the last bit for the advanced circuits, I also start working on making more stainless steel, getting the chrome from ruby and getting the manganese from pyrolusite, processing it through the macerator for more output. I set up the to-do list. There's 4 main things that I want to do. I want to kill the ender dragon. I want to get ore processing somewhat set up. I want to get a better source of rubber, and originally I want to do styrene butadiene, but I later end up going for silicone rubber, as we'll end up seeing. And finally, I want to get the clean room. Happily, we get all of those done today, so let's get to it. Let's not jump into things too hastily. We're going to start by making ourselves the gold caps for a gold-capped wooden wand. Thaumcraft wand progression is painful and takes a lot more V than it should take, but I'm going to just kind of sideline that. I get the gold caps, we're going to need that for a gold-capped wooden wand in due time. I also upgraded the Canthal EBF to run off of EV power rather than HV, so 4 amps of HV power. This means that I can process more recipes and also can process recipes faster, but unfortunately that comes at the downside of our second EBF becoming completely useless at the moment, and I don't fix that for a while. I also notice we have a desperate oxygen shortage. In order to fix this glaring oxygen problem, which we do need to fix because we need oxygen to make stainless steel in any sort of large capacity, I decided to triple our electrolysis setup. We're going to still be electrolyzing water for this, and that's not necessarily the most effective method, but it is the most simple method and it's the most free method, and sugar is just not something I have in large supply at the moment. I faff around with the design for a minute, but really, it's not complicated, and it took me maybe 40 minutes in order to set up. And I just effectively tripled our oxygen production, and that's that. And it's just been running at that. When I disconnected my oil setup from my top diesel production to my cetane boosted diesel production, I also disconnected the tank there, and I decided to let the remainder that's in the tank just distill out into ethylene for my polyethylene setup. That has exhausted all the oil in the tank, and therefore I destroyed the tank. It is now saying goodbye to it. I didn't even replace the polyethylene oil input for a while, because I just kind of don't need to, because it made more than 100,000 buckets of ethylene. I delayed it for a minute, but now I'm finally actually connecting up EV power to my EBF. For a while, it was just running at 2 amps of HV power, which is kind of okay, but we do need the full 4 amps, so now it can run continuously. And, pretty nicely, it can make stainless steel in 30 seconds. So, that's good, because we need stacks and stacks and stacks of stainless steel. Resources are becoming troublesome. And here you can see me starting to work on making those stacks of stainless steel, where I'm making 128 more stainless steel. So much so that I need a tank to supply the input hatch with oxygen for the recipe. And I guess with that you can also see the effectiveness of the oxygen distillation setup, because it went from 0 to 128,000 buckets. Also, I don't talk about mining much, but probably one of the first ore veins I'm going to clear out entirely is going to be this magnetite vein. You need a lot of gold for HV. I then make the HV autoclave. I forgot why I made this, honestly. I kind of have no clue why I made it, but I did make it. More usefully, I start working on making eyes of ender in the HV chemical reactor. these we need for obviously some HP components, but also for obviously going to the end, which is one of the plans. Again, I plan on taking on the Ender Dragon. The Advanced Fluid Solidifier is another machine that I make, and I actually mainly make this for going to the end, for some extrusion stuff. But we'll get to that fairly shortly here. So yes, our next short stint is with battle prep. In this case, I upgrade my longsword to steel, my longsword from steel to vanadium steel, and I also enchant it with sharpness, and I also start work on making a crossbow. I think I lost my crossbow a while back. I make dark steel bolts for it this time instead of alumite. So these are much stronger. I also make the crossbow out of energetic alloy instead of wood like it was before. I think in some point my backpack got deleted, so that's why I don't have my wooden crossbow, and I have to make it out of energetic alloy this time. But yeah, that's a much, much stronger. I think it is 35 hearts of damage. And I decided to test out that crossbow on the Twilight Lich. We need to kill the Twilight Lich in order to upgrade to Greatwood Swan, so that's one of the reasons we need him. And honestly, the battle is very embarrassing. I for a moment forget how to actually fight the Twilight Lich, and it takes me a while to actually situate with it. And I also die once during it, so that's not fun. But he also dies in 2 hits, so he's not terribly impressive either. It takes 2 hits of the crossbow to kill him, because it's just that strong. So, not a very fun fight. However, with the Twilight Lich killed, we can then make ourselves Greatwood Wands. First, we have to make a gold-banded wooden wand, and then we have to fill that up to max V in order to make, after that, an iron-banded Greatwood Wand. And then after that, we're going to have to make ourselves a gold-banded Greatwood Wand. I don't end up making the gold-banded Greatwood Wand today. I just make the iron-banded Greatwood Wand. But we will need the gold-banded one eventually. So, yay. Oh, and if anyone knows how to transfer V between wands, please do tell. This is annoying. I actually decided to not go for the gold caps. I'm going to be going for the enchanted cloth caps. They're going to be slightly more expensive, but they're going to provide me an immediate V discount. Anyways, now we can start getting to the big stuff. And that is, we are going to start working a little bit on ore processing by making our first 8 HV macerators. I'm not going to explain quite yet why we're going for HV macerators, but I will remind you once we do actually get to the point of building the ore processing area. Because we're not going to focus on ore processing right now. I wanted to get the 8 universal macerators, despite how expensive they are, and they are expensive. But we're going to try and take on the Ender Dragon first. And to get the Ender Pearls for that, we're going to melt them up in a smeltery, because it's the easiest way to do it. After making some more Eyes of Ender, we can start actually scouting out for the end portal. Same thing as it is in regular Minecraft, where you just use them to locate it. And the last Eye of Ender points it to being right under this ice river, which we dig through slowly in order to get to the eventual stronghold. So, the Ender Dragon. Why do I even want to kill the Ender Dragon? Honestly, the reason is just for a reliable supply of Ender Pearls. I could use the quest in the Coins tab in order to get Endermen, throw them in the smeltery, and that would be a perfectly serviceable way to get Ender Pearls. But I want Ender IO conduits pretty shortly here, and more specifically, item conduits, and those take a decent amount of Ender Pearls to get a big supply of. But there we go. We find the stronghold, we set up the portal, and I realize I am exactly 1 Eye of Ender short. So, let's get that last one, shall we? And prepare while we're at it. Now, while I prepare to fight the Ender Dragon, I don't necessarily prepare well. Yeah. At some point, the Ender Dragon even bugs out and he just, like, disappears. I literally didn't know where he was at this point. I had to go into creative mode to find him. After maybe too many resets and backup loadings, and now I've lost the death count on this series, we do end up eventually defeating the Ender Dragon. Because the fight ended up taking about an hour and a half with all the reloads, you're not, unfortunately, getting the uncut footage of it. But, yeah, it took too long. Too long. The fight itself isn't even all that difficult. The crossbow does a ridiculous amount of damage, but diamond armor just isn't strong enough to take on the Ender Dragon. I really respect anyone who's able to play GTNH in hardcore mode, because sometimes it's just unfair. I was pretty well prepared when it came to my weaponry, but I guess just not for the armory. Those complaints aside, the Ender Dragon does eventually go down with just a couple more crossbow. Most of the things it drops are, again, useless, because I want the Ender Pearls pretty much exclusively. But we will have to do some more shenanigans with Hardcore Ender expansion shortly here. Well, not shortly here, but eventually. So, yeah. Either way, end access for Ender Pearls, and we're gonna want a lot of Ender Pearls. More nicely, that is one of the 4 things I wanted to get done this episode finished. So, there we go. Ender Dragon. Let's talk ore processing for a moment. So, ore processing at the moment has been pretty rudimentary. We macerate ores in the large steam grinder, and we mostly macerate ores that we need a lot of at once, like copper or tin. As we get further into the pack, this becomes less viable of an option, to the point where it becomes an unviable option, and explicitly disadvantageous to do. So, we're going to have to set up a dedicated ore processing system that will be able to process ores through its multiple different pathways to get dedicated byproducts that are good for what we're going for. So let's talk about that. There's 3 main routes that ores go down. They either go through a mainly maceration route, an ore washing and maceration route, or a centrifugation route, in which case you use the thermal centrifuge. All ores are macerated first. However, some ores should then be washed and then macerated, some ores should be macerated again immediately after, and some ores should be washed and then put through the thermal centrifuge in order to get their most preferred byproduct. And again, it just depends on the byproduct that you want. The reason I want 8 HV macerators is because you only get byproducts at the HV level of maceration. Not at LV, not at MV. You need HV macerators if you want byproducts. With this setup that we have here, we're running at about 4 times the speed of the steam grinder, which is also, of course, 8 times the speed of the regular steam macerator. So that's nice. We'll get to the other setups for ore processing soon, but for right now, we just have the macerate setup, and that's pretty good. We can very quickly macerate a bunch of ores. I next make the HV Precision Laser Engraver. I honestly don't remember the specific reason I made it. I think I made it specifically because I wanted cheaper circuits. So, yeah, I do eventually need the HV Precision Laser Engraver, no doubt about it, but I don't think I needed it at this specific moment. I then set up the thermal centrifuges. The thermal centrifuges are weird. They take 2 amps of MV power, so I'm definitely not running HV thermal centrifuges because they take an insane amount of power in order to keep running constantly. And I can't even run like 8 MV thermal centrifuges because that would still take a ton of power. So I just run 4 of them and leave it at that. I also set up distilleries. This is kind of preempting for the ore washing plants. Distilled water both takes less time and it takes less water in order to wash a certain ore with it. So I want to produce a lot of distilled water, and one of the best ways to do that is, well, just have a bunch of distilleries running off of one turbo combustion engine, because you can just do that. And, yeah, they're all just running, and they'll all just make distilled water pretty much constantly. In this case, I stored in an HV fluid tank, which will store 256,000 buckets, which is roughly 4,000 chunks of ore, so that's probably good enough. Again, this part is mostly just preempting for when I get the ore washing plants. Right now, we only have the macerators and the thermal centrifuges doing the work for us. We eventually need regular centrifuges and ore washing plants, but we'll get those in due time. Just from preemptively running the thing on magnetite ore, we can already see that it is yielding some quite good fruit. I have a lot of magnetite ore from mining in that magnetite vein, and just from iron ore, I've gotten some gold. I also, with some of this stuff, make an HV wrench. Now I have the electric wrench, which is not only stronger, but also destroys things extremely quickly. It is honestly instant with how it destroys things, so it's very useful, especially when we're working with a lot of machines. I also set up the centrifuges. I actually couldn't find in the recording footage where I sent up the centrifuges, but they're there. I make the arc furnace as well, because the LV arc furnace is painfully slow. I don't think I need the HV arc furnace for anything, but god, the LV one can go suck a chode. Anyways, now here's 8 turbo centrifuges, eight advanced centrifuges, which are going to then be centrifuging whatever ores we get left. Pretty much all routes for ore processing stop at the centrifuge, so they're one of the most vital components to have. You need to centrifuge just about every ore that ends up coming through. And the macerators are fast, unlike the centrifuges, which actually have variable processing speeds depending on the type of dust. Fortunately, I do believe that all of the dusts will work for it. It's just that they'll take different amounts of time. For example, iron dust takes about 5 seconds, but silver dust takes about 20. So, yeah, it changes, and it differs what we need to do. The setup for these things, by the way, is exactly the same. I could set up a fully automatic ore processing system where if I throw in an ore, it will just process through all the machines the way I want it to, without me having to do anything. So it would be fully automatic. But I was told by people in the GTNH Discord that that takes a long time. It's very annoying and fiddly, and also it's way easier to do with AE2. So I'm deciding to just wait on that for AE2, and instead have these kind of semi-automatic systems where I just load it into that iron chest and it will extract out into the diamond chest. And that works fairly well. Here I'm making soul vials. This stuff I mostly needed for quests, but also they're going to be useful for eventually a powered spawner, or there's just a couple of things that soul vials are good for. Even without the ore washing, which would complete the ore processing setup and is what I'm still waiting on, the ore processing that we have right now is actually fairly good at getting the really useful components that we need. In this case, I'm using it to get all the copper and then get some byproducts like antimony from it. And in fact, I've gotten a bunch of antimony just from processing tetrahedrite ore and not even from antimony itself. That's how good the byproducts are. Also, I finished something that I could have done in LV. I make the item dislocator. This is something that I was able to do for a while, but I mean, I just kind of waited until now to do it for no good reason. But yeah, now I don't need to run to get all my items and stuff. It's good. It's useful. It's nice to have a new baubles, and it's nice to have that. And there are 6 advanced ore washing plants. The final thing we really need for ore processing. There is sifting, but we'll get to that. We won't do that in this episode. The setup for ore washing is fairly simple, except now we have to input distilled water into it as well. I found that running 6 off of 1 HV engine was pretty much the best I could do. Because these things use, I believe, 64 EU per tick, and with the loss it would be problematic. Anyways, so yeah, so I could only use 6 of the advanced ore washing plants, but that's still fairly good. Ore washing is a pretty interesting step of the whole process because it kind of is required for 2 steps. You can use it for either the thermal centrifuge or for the purified centrifuge route. And I mostly don't use it for the thermal centrifuge route, but really that kind of just depends on what the ore washing byproduct is going to be. And it also depends on the byproduct pathway I want to use for it. I'm not going to talk about what pathway I use for what ore, because if you look at the things that I'm low on, it would pretty much be obvious. Like, obviously I'm going to want something that gives me more chrome, because I need more chrome. But it really just depends. And for some things that I don't care about, it's literally just vibes based. So, yeah. Either way, that is ore washing hooked up. That's pretty much everything for ore processing. We have the macerator, we have the centrifuge, we have the thermal centrifuge, and we have the ore washing plants. It's done. We have pretty much everything. If we just put our ores into the chests, they will eventually turn into the stuff that we need. And here we have cobalt being turned into purified, or copper being turned into purified copper, which can then be macerated to have a small chance of getting gold out of it, funnily enough. The problem here was that I didn't connect up the power source. Yeah, that was something I didn't figure out until later. As we get into higher voltages, byproducts from ore processing are going to become more required and more pivotal in things that we need more of. So really, it's just a case of exponentiating resource costs. Originally, when we started, we didn't need chrome for anything. Now we need a lot of chrome, and we need chrome for multiple appliances. So yeah, we're going to need it as a byproduct of ores. We didn't need gold in massive quantities, but now we do. We need stacks of gold, so we need to get gold through other methods. So that's the reason why we need all this. We just need more resources, and the only way to get them is as a byproduct. Another thing I briefly mentioned here is the sifter. So gems like diamonds, rubies, emeralds, if you want the gem, you can't get them through this ore processing, whatever nonsense. You have to use a sifter. And I haven't really decided what kind of sifter I'm going to use. I think I might be going for the multi-block sifter immediately, because it's pretty cheap looking, honestly. But we don't even get that in this episode, and that's not on the docket. So, there we are. 2 out of the 4 things complete. Let's start moving towards the third one by making our first dose of silicone rubber. The first dose of silicone rubber I'm making by hand, actually, rather than making it any other way. In this case, we make it out of methane and then chlorine, which then turns it into chloroform, which we then react in order to create polydimethyl siloxane dust. So it's a whole ass process. Eventually, we're going to make an LCR, though, and that's going to make it way, way, way nicer and easier to do. But for right now, we just have this way to get dimethyl dichlorosilane and then polydimethyl siloxane, which is fun to say, but not really that fun to make. The good thing about silicone rubber, though, is that it has a 1/9 usage in an assembling machine for making wires. So it is extremely resource efficient at making wires, if nothing else. So that is the reason why I want it. I don't want to keep making rubber for making wires because it's annoying, and also it won't last for much longer because eventually we're going to have to switch to something else. And I could switch to styrene butadiene, which is an option, but it would take a lot of processing, and I kind of don't want to do it. So I might as well set up silicone rubber while I can. And that is exactly what I do. Here I'm making a large chemical reactor and an HV forming press. The large chemical reactor is the really important part here, because much like with nitric acid, we can turn a multi-step process that requires a bunch of circling around of resources into a single-step process. And in this case, this single-step process will turn methane, chlorine, and water straight into polydimethyl siloxane and some hydrochloric acid beds. So we do still have to reprocess the hydrochloric acid, so it's not a immediate, like, just put all the items in and get polydimethylsiloxane out, it does have some residuals, and it does actually have a chlorine loss. You actually lose chlorine while making stuff in it. But it is way better than if I did the whole last processing line, because it is a single chemical reactor, and or is a single recipe and one chemical reactor for turning hydrogen and carbon into methane, which is ridiculously easy because I have infinite hydrogen and I can just supply carbon when I need to. So what I decide to do here is I make it so that I have to manually supply carbon and manually supply chlorine, and basically the rest of it happens automatically. The only thing I don't do is I don't automate the distillation of I don't automate the electrolyzation of hydrochloric acid into hydrogen and chlorine, and I don't automate the distillation of dilute hydrochloric acid into hydrochloric acid, which I can then electrolyze again. So it's not actually that fast, because I do have to continuously cycle around the hydrochloric acid, and it's slightly lossy on that. But it is much better than if I was to do the regular chemical reactor recipes. That is for sure. It is much faster. It is much cleaner. It is just a better recipe. And I spent a bit of a while explaining it while I was setting up the whole thing here. As for how to improve it later on, the only real things I can think of are automate the supplying of silicone dust, which isn't going to happen for a long time because we don't really have automated silicon, and there's better things to use automated silicon on. And also automate the supply of chlorine, which we aren't going to be able to do for a long time because we don't have automated chlorine anywhere. And there's, again, better things to spend chlorine on. But for right now, this is a pretty good source of PDMS, which is, I guess, what I'm going to refer to polydimethylsiloxane as, because polydimethylsiloxane is fun to say, but a bit wordy, isn't it? Ender Dragon knocked off, or processing knocked off, and now Silicone Rubber knocked off. It is time for the Cleanroom. The Cleanroom is one of the strangest multi-blocks in Gregtech. As of late, our multi-blocks have basically all just been bigger versions of machines. The Cleanroom is not that. The Cleanroom is a machine, but it is a machine's machine. It is a machine by which you place other machines inside of it, and that's what makes the Cleanroom special. Before I can really get to the Cleanroom, or I guess while I'm getting to the Cleanroom, I also upgrade my second EBF to EV power, to 4 amps HV, so 1 amp EV power with 2 HV energy hatches. So again, it can run at higher voltages, run recipes faster. This is going to be especially useful because I need a lot of resources. I need a lot of stainless steel, I need a lot of stuff, especially for the Cleanroom. Despite the fact that this is now at EV power, because it's still at copper-nickel heating capacity, it's limited in its use. But it still does have plenty of uses, no doubt about it. To get the Cleanroom, we're going to need a lot of supplies. One of the things we're going to need an especially large amount of is filters. Filters take a stack of steel and 16 zinc each. They're not terribly difficult to craft, just a few of, but we're going to need about 12 of them. So on that level, they are expensive. And we're also going to need plasticine blocks, which take black steel frames, polyethylene pulps, and wet concrete. Again, individually, they're not very expensive, but we need to make about 70 of them. So at that level, they are expensive. Here, we're making the Cleanroom controller. We're going to only need one of these for the machine, and there is going to be in the top center. The quest has us make a couple of different things. In this case, we're going to need the filtered machine casings, the reinforced glass, and then we're going to need a bunch of machine components to put on the side of the Cleanroom in order to make it so that it can function. At this point, we start making the first of the plasticine blocks. These are again very easy to make, at least in small amounts, But again, we're going to need a lot of them, and they're expensive in the cost of the black steel that you need. Black steel is an alloy of nickel, steel, and a couple of other things. But it needs to be heated up in an EBF, so that's what makes it mostly expensive. We also need, again, a lot of foils, and these things aren't too expensive on their own, but each of them takes 8 steel, and steel is, it's not too expensive, but it's still not easiest thing to get, especially a full stack of it. And then we can start making the filter machine casings for the clean room, of which we need 8 of them. I make it through the assembler because why would you not make it through the assembler? It is just blatantly more expensive to craft it. And I start making some of the other things, the LV energy hatch, the HV, the NV diode, some of the machine holds. There's just a bunch of things that the quest wants you to get for the clean room, like a reinforced door or a travel anchor. But really, it's all just for siding. In this case, you can get the reinforced door to enter it, but you can also get an elevator or a travel anchor. It doesn't really matter. And I just need one of them. Because it is a very variable multi-block. It is one where just 70% of the sidings have to be made of plascrete. And here we are, almost finishing the plascrete that we actually need. We are almost done making it, and therefore, we are almost done with the clean room. Altogether, it's not a terribly expensive multi-block to make, but it's not super easy either. The cost of each of the components is certainly not high at all, but it's not, like, low. It's still a bit pricey. And we're making a pretty small clean room here. This clean room is only going to be 5x5. Its max size is 15x15. And just so happens that 5x5 fits perfectly into the floor here. So let's talk about how the clean room functions, because it's not like any other Gregtech multi-block. Here I am just reading through some of it. So the thing about the clean room is that it's a multi-block for other machines to run in. The clean room provides a quote-unquote sterile environment for reactions to happen. So what it is it is a big room that you supply power into, and then certain recipes can only be ran in a clean room. That's really the basic gist of it. The reason why you need the clean room is it's just an arbitrary requirement for some recipes. It's not a vehicle by which recipes happen. You don't ever put items into the clean room. You make recipes in the clean room. And the recipes that you make in the clean room are primarily circuit-based recipes. So in this case, as we're going to want to upgrade our circuits, we're going to want to get EV circuits pretty soon here. We're going to want the clean room because the clean room is the only way to make EV circuits. You can't make them any other way. And pretty much all circuits after HV require the clean room to be used in order to make them in some capacity. So this is a necessary multi-block, not just for this tier, but for every tier, because it is just required for almost every circuit. And a couple of other recipes, like wetware recipes especially. Some of the sidings to the clean room are pretty obvious. Obviously, we need an LV energy hatch in order to power the clean room. The regular machine holes on the side might not be obvious, but those are for automatic input and output of things, when we do eventually need to do that, like with AE2. Because we obviously can't just run a cable into here and then put on some covers. That's not sterile enough, so we have to use the machine holes in the side. Anyways, this is the clean room. It says that it's an incomplete structure. That's because the door is not in here. So that's literally the only reason. And with that, the clean room is technically complete. However, we need to power it. So the thing about the clean room is that it takes time in order for it to start up. So the clean room has an efficiency rating. Right now it's at 0% efficiency because it's not running. When you turn the clean room on, it will take 9 seconds, and then depending on how much it's overclocked, it will go up by 1% of efficiency, or it will go up by some amount of efficiency. Or rather, the amount of time it takes for one cycle to run changes depending on how much it's overclocked. At base, it only uses 40 EU per tick and then downgrades as time progresses. So it's going to use 40 EU per tick to start up, and then it's going to slow down to eventually be running at 4 EU per tick. So it is actually pretty cheap in its power costs. It basically doesn't take any power to run at all. 4 EU per tick is less than nothing. It is absolutely microscopic compared to the amount of power generation we're getting nowadays. So the clean room is not terribly expensive to run. The thing is that it needs to be supplied 4 EU per tick constantly. And if the clean room ever drops below in efficiency, it will void the outputs of some recipes. So if you only have 90% efficiency, there's only a 90% chance that you will actually receive an output from your recipe. So you always want it at 100% efficiency, obviously. Because you do not want to be losing recipes randomly in the clean room. So, as we set up the power to the clean room, we should ask ourselves, how long does it take for the clean room to start up? Well, each cycle takes 9 seconds, and each cycle will increase the efficiency by 1%. Therefore, it will take about 10 minutes to start up a clean room from 0% efficiency. Yeah, it's slow, to say the least. So it's not a machine that you can really turn on and off. It is a machine that needs to be constantly running, because starting it back up again will just take forever. You can overclock it, obviously. Same as with any machine. Overclocking will change the amount of power it takes by 4, but double its speed. So we can lower it down to running at 16 EU per tick passively, which is still nothing. And it will only take 5 minutes to start up. And I'm considering actually doing that, but for right now, it's not really important. All that's important is that we have the clean room. Because, yeah, while I was doing that whole thing, there it is. It's done. We have the clean room. The clean room is extraordinarily useful. There's a lot of very valuable, very useful things we can do in here. Obviously, we can make circuits with it. We can make the new clean room specific circuits, especially EV circuits. It's a very special thing. But another nice thing that we can do is we can cut up phosphorus doped wafers in here, which gives us a higher output from our wafers. Just for doing nothing but cutting them up in the clean room. Here I set up a maintenance cover on my clean room controller so I know when there's maintenance issues. Because for every maintenance issue this thing has, it will void 10% of the output. So I don't want any maintenance issues. I want to know if there is a problem. Anyways, there it is. It is running at 100% efficiency, only using 4 EU per tick. So now we can finally cut up that phosphorus dope silicone wool that I made an episode ago. And with that, I think we should start being ready to head it off, shall we? The clean room has opened up a lot more options for us. A lot more options to do with circuits, a lot more options to do with just electronic processing. EV circuits open up a wide swath of machines, especially multi-blocks, and it's just such an incredibly useful achievement. I also put in the precision laser engraver in here because I need to do that as well for some things, like, for example, CPUs. So we can get cheaper circuits, we can get more circuits. The clean room opens up such a wide amount of recipes for us, and such a versatile kind of moveset that we have access to, all just because of it. with things like the ore processing and the silicone rubber, and especially the clean room, we're kind of putting ourselves on the footpath, getting the footstones out for moving to EV. We're not going to do that yet. We're not going to do that anytime soon. EV is still a long, long ways away. But it's on the horizon. That's for sure. I find it hard to overstate how excited I am to be at this point, because this is just straight up the furthest I've ever made it into Gregtech New Horizons. I've never made the clean room. I've never gotten this far into HV. I'd only ever dipped my toes into HV. So I'm excited to see what the future holds in store for us, to see what I can do. With the clean room, the ore processing, and all that, what we're going to do with that is a question for next time.